Hello, I'm Mike Royko, and this is the story of Chicago and the Cubs, a lifelong love affair. It's history, sure, a slice of Americana, but it's also a story of a unique ballpark, the players who took to the field, the fans who took them to their hearts, and a city that considers the whole spectacle as much a part of the environment as, well, as water and air.
My kind of town, Chicago is. The Wrigley Building, Chicago is. My kind of town that won't let you down. It's my kind of town.
My kind of town, Chicago is. My kind of town, Chicago is.
Dance over the cup, win it on a Billy Williams home run.
The Wrigley Building, Chicago is.
It's a no-hitter! It's a no-hitter for Kenny Holtzman!
The Chicago Cubbies, Chicago is.
There's a drive in the deep left corner, way back.
It's mine. All of it is mine. My kind of town. Chicago, Chicago, Chicago. My kind of town. Chicago.
This old pumping station, despite popular belief, isn't the only part of Chicago's past that survived the Great Fire of 1871. In a roundabout way, there was a baseball team that made it too. Back in 1871, a team called the Chicago White Stockings became the city's first professional baseball club. That team did okay for a while, but a funny thing happened to the White Stockings on the way to their pennant. Mrs. O'Leary's cow came along and, as legend has it, kicked over a lantern, and you know the rest. Well, it was 2 years before anyone even thought about playing baseball in Chicago again. The year was 1875, and the world was in the throes of the Industrial Revolution. That was most apparent in cities like Chicago, where the population grew in leaps and bounds. Now those people needed to be entertained, and baseball was one way to do it. By 1876, a league of professional baseball clubs was formed by William A. Hulbert, who had become the president of the dormant White Stockings a year earlier. Hulbert immediately coerced Boston Star pitcher A.G. Spalding to come to Chicago, where he won 43 games, and along with the legendary Cap Anson combined to bring Chicago its first pennant in 1876. Anson later went on to become the first Mr. Cub, compiling more than 3,000 hits in his 22-year playing career, while also managing the team to 3 consecutive pennants from 1880 to 1882. The early Chicago team was not only good in the Midwest, they were good all over the world too, as evidenced by their global tour in 1888, which included what must now be considered the ultimate sandlot game, by the pyramids along the Nile. In 1902, the team became known as the Cubs because it had a lot of young players, and in 1905, Frank Chance took over as manager. Soon the Cubs built a powerhouse, with third baseman Harry Steinfeld, the legendary double-play combination of Joe Tinker, Johnny Evers, and player-manager Chance. The pitching staff had Mordecai Three Fingers Brown, who won 20 games 6 seasons in a row, Orville Overall, who won 23 games in 1907, and Ed Rulebach, who, beginning in 1906, won 79 games in 4 years. The 1906 Cubs won a record 116 games, and went on to face the White Sox in the only crosstown World Series Chicago has ever seen. The Cubs were heavily favored, but the Sox prevailed, winning the series in 6 games. A year later, the Cubs returned to the series again, where this time they took 4 straight from the Detroit Tigers, holding the legendary Ty Cobb to a .200 average in the series. Today, it's sort of disheartening to look back and realize that the last time the Cubs were a powerhouse, the Wright brothers were just beginning to fly, but such was the case in 1908, which happened to be the 3rd consecutive year the Cubs found themselves in the series. Only that year, things weren't so easy. After winning the pennant by 20 and 17 games the previous 2 seasons, the Cubs needed a miracle, or more accurately, a miraculous blunder to help them win the pennant. In a crucial game in late September, the New York Giants seemingly beat the Cubs on an Al Bridwell single in the bottom of the ninth. But as fans poured onto the field, Fred Merkle of the Giants, who had been on first, headed straight for the center field clubhouse, never touching second base. After Merkle was called out, a near riot ensued, and the game couldn't be resumed. Eventually, the Giants blew their 5-game lead and then lost a replay of Merkle's game 4-2 as the Cubs won the pennant and eventually the series over the Tigers. Soon after, however, fortunes changed. And although they still had players like Frank Schulte and 1912's Triple Crown winner Heine Zimmerman, the Cubs fell on hard times. Meanwhile, Chicago was building beyond its stockyards. In 1916, the Republicans held the National Convention of the city for the third consecutive time, reaffirming Chicago's political clout. The clout of the Cubs, however, had diminished, and in 1916 they were sold to Charlie Wegman, who previously owned a team in the Federal League. He promptly moved the team to a ballpark built 2 years earlier at Clark and Addison Streets, which would later be called Wrigley Field. But aside from that, it's likely that Wegman will best be remembered for being the first owner to allow spectators to keep foul balls. However, it's very likely that few foul balls reached the stands when the Cubs' Hippo Vaughn and the Reds' Fred Toney pitched the only double no-hitter in baseball history on May 2nd, 1917. Because of the war, the 1918 season was cut short right after Labor Day, and the Cubs were awarded the pennant because they had a 10.5-game lead over the second-place Giants. They did, however, go on to lose a 6-game series to the Red Sox and their star pitcher, Babe Ruth. Soon after that, William Wrigley became the Cubs' new owner and named Bill Veeck Sr. as the team's president. With a duo like that, you might think that winning would have come easy, but it didn't, as the Cubs made the second division their home away from home for the next several years. However, there were some bright spots, such as Grover Cleveland Alexander, who won 27 games in 1920. But for the most part, the Cubs of the early 20s were probably best known for training on Catalina Island, which was Mr. Wrigley's private haven off the coast of California. They certainly weren't known for winning, and in fact, the fun-loving Cubs of 1925 finished in last place for the first time in team history. A year later, there were changes all over Chicago. The original portion of Wacker Drive was completed, a 2-level street with an eye toward practicality. Not to be outdone, that same year the Cubs went for practicality too, hiring manager Joe McCarthy, who turned the team into immediate winners. With help, of course. There was pitcher Charlie Root, the Cubs' all-time win leader with 201. And Riggs Stevenson, the Cubs' all-time career batting leader with a .336 average. Add to them Kai Carler, who hit over 305 times in his 7 Chicago seasons, as well as Rogers Hornsby and Hack Wilson, and the Cubs had a North Side version of Murderers Row. Of course, the Cubs weren't alone in murdering opponents, especially in Chicago during the 1920s. However, people did forget about Al Capone, at least for a while, in 1929. That year, outfielders Wilson, Stevenson, and Carler all had more than 100 RBIs, the only time that's ever happened in baseball history. As for the Cubs, well, they won the pennant, but then lost to Connie Mack's Philadelphia A's in the series when the A's came from 8 runs down to win Game 4 and 2 down in the bottom of the 9th to win the 5th and final game. The loss stayed with the Cubs the next year as they failed to recapture the pennant, even though Hack Wilson had one of the greatest years ever. That season, in 1930, Wilson hit 56 homers and drove in a Major League record 190 runs. 2 years later, in 1932, shortstop Billy Jurgis was shot during the season, but he recovered, as did the Cubs, who found themselves facing the New York Yankees in the '32 series. But the New Yorkers proved too tough, taking 4 straight by the combined score of 37-19. In 1933, Chicago opened its second World's Fair, and this one had a definite eye towards the future. So too did the Cubs, especially player-manager Charlie Grimm, who was beginning to become less of a player and more of a manager. Along those lines, in 1935, Grimm brought up 17-year-old rookie Phil Cavarretta to take his place on first. Cavarretta joined established stars like Billy Herman, a career 300 hitter whose 227 hits led the National League that year. Then there were the two 20-game winners that year, Lon Warneke and Bill Lee, as the Cubs won the pennant again, this time in miraculous style, winning 21 straight in September. But a world championship was not to be, as the Cubs lost their 5th series in a row, this time falling to the Tigers in 6 games. Keeping to their schedule of winning a pennant every 3 years, the Cubs did it again in 1938, thanks in part to the legendary Dizzy Dean, who won 7 of 8 decisions in his first season in a Chicago uniform. '38 was also the year that catcher Gabby Hartman took over for Grimm as manager midway through the season. The Cubs had been in 3rd place, but under Gabby they staged a furious comeback, which culminated when Hartnett himself hit his famous homer in the Gloman to help overtake the Pirates near the end of the season. When it was over, the Cubs had won 21 of their final 25 to take the pennant. The World Series was next. But before Cub fans would get too excited about their team, along came the New York Yankees. Babe Ruth might have been gone, but the Yanks still had Lou Gehrig and a newcomer named Joe DiMaggio. That team proved to be so powerful that only Dizzy Dean came close to winning a game for the Cubs as the Yanks swept 4 straight yet again, this time outscoring the Cubs 22-9. And to add insult to injury, it was one of 7 pennants in New York for ex-Cub manager Joe McCarthy. The war years followed soon after, but Chicagoans were still interested in following their Cubs, especially in 1945 when the pennant wound up in Chicago again. One reason it did was Andy Pafko, who drove in 110 runs that year. Another was Stan Hack, one of only 6 Cub players to have more than 2,000 career hits. Add to them Phil Cavarretta, the league's leading hitter in 1945, as well as the league's MVP a year earlier in Bill Nicholson, and a pitcher by the name of Hank Borowy, who went 11-2 after coming to the team in late July. And you could see why the Tigers should have been worried, only they weren't. And the Cubs lost yet another series, this time in 7 games. That particular loss marked the end of an era where Chicago, but there were some great individual performers. For instance, Hank Sauer, who was called the mayor of Wrigley Field without stealing a vote. He won the MVP award in 1952, leading the league in homers and RBIs. In September of the next year, Ernie Banks appeared in a Cubs uniform for the first time. Banks, of course, was an immediate success, and although the Cubs never won a pennant during his career, Banks himself won the MVP award in both 58 and 59, the first back-to-back winner in National League history. In 1961, Billy Williams became the first Cub to win the Rookie of the Year award. Together with Banks, Williams gave the Cubs hope for the future, which might have worked out even sooner if Lou Brock hadn't been traded away or 1962's Rookie of the Year, Kenny Hubbs, hadn't died in a plane crash. Then again, there was that college of coaches approach to managing in the early 1960s that was bound to hold back the Cubs anyway. But all that began to change in 1966 when Leo Durocher was named the team's manager. Leo brought a winning attitude to Chicago right away, although having players like catcher Randy Hundley and pitcher Fergie Jenkins certainly had something to do with the team's turnaround. Add to them Banks and Williams, and players like second baseman Glenn Beckert, shortstop Don Kessinger, and third baseman Ron Santo, and you can see why the Cubs were on the verge of something great in the late 60s. Unfortunately, during that same time, something great was not happening to Mayor Daley and the city of Chicago. The spring and summer of 1968, with its riots and infamous Democratic convention, may have been the most painful in Chicago's modern history. That is until the next year, 1969. That's when Chicago fans found out what a real hangover feels like. In 1969, the Cubs were favored to win the pennant, and for a while they played like it.
Deep to right, back, high! It's all over! Willie Smith just homered! The Cubs win the game! That's it! There she goes! Back! Hey! Hickman did it again!
The old June swoon that year? No way. Those were different Cubs. The swoon would come a little later when the Mets made their move.
Well hit. Deep to left center. That's way back there. It is caught and dropped by Young. He had it in his glove, and then he whacked into the fence out there and jarred the ball out of it. Ferguson Jenkins trying now to send the ball game into extra innings. There is a drive into short left. It is a base hit. The ball game is all over.
A few months later, it was the season that was all over.
There's a base hit to right. Agee rounds third. Eddie Yost waves him in. The throw in. He is saved at the plate. And Hundley is really hollering at Davidson.
No matter how much hollering the Cubs did, there was nothing they could do to stop the Mets in 1969. After spending 155 consecutive days alone in first place, the Cubs had to settle for second. In fact, settling was something Cub fans had to do for the next 15 years. There were some bright spots, though, like the back-to-back batting titles Bill Madlock won in 1975 and 76.
That's a pretty well-hit ball to right. The ball game is over. Madlock has sent one to the wall. What a day that Madlock has had.
Yeah, but Madlock was traded the next season. But 4 years later, in 1980, the Cubs had another batting champion, Bill Buckner.
Oh, there's one hit deep to right field. Hey, kiss it goodbye. A grand slammer by Buckner.
A year earlier, in 1979, Cub fans were treated to the Major League leader in home runs, Dave Kingman.
Hey, kiss it goodbye. It is gone. That one's in Milwaukee. It hit the front porch of the third house across Waveland Avenue. Man, oh man, isn't that something?
In 1980, Kingman's celebrity landed him a column in the Tribune. But Dave, of course, turned out to be much better with his bat than his pen, and his column, like his Cub career, would be over by the end of the season. The same year the Cubs had the best home run hitter in the National League, they also had the best pitcher. Bruce Sutter won 6 and saved 37 of the Cubs' 80 wins in 1979 and became only the second Cub pitcher to win a Cy Young Award. But even with Kingman and Sutter, by the end of the 70s, Cub fans were at the height of their frustration. Good news, though, was right around the corner. In August of 1981, the Wrigley family, which had owned the Cubs since December of 1915, decided to sell the team to their neighbors across Michigan Avenue, the Tribune Company.
We were very hopeful for a positive vote, and we got an 11-0 vote. As Andy said, we're very, very pleased when we had the affirmative vote from Chubb and the owners.
Soon after the new owners took control of the Cubs, an optimistic Dallas Green was named the general manager.
We're going to be very competitive, and we're going to move up in the standings, and if we get to that 500 mark, like I said, I think anything can happen.
Although very little happened during Green's first 2 years, things began to change when Jim Frey became the manager in 1984. Although optimism hadn't been part of a Cub fan's vocabulary for what seemed like an eternity, Frey would eventually lead the Cubs to a storybook season in his first year.
We're writing the script. Having won in 39 years, we'll be going down in history.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Right from the first pitch, it was obvious that the 1984 season would be different, and as things turned out, it was.
Mark Davis's delivery. Line drive, base hit for Denier. And a way to start the new year.
What a way to start it, all right. Through the middle of June, the Cubs held on to first place, and then made a trade that really got them going. Rick Sutcliffe came from the Indians and went on to win 16 of 17 decisions as the lead steadily increased. Fittingly, the final challenge would come from the Mets. But unlike 1969, this was the Cubs' year.
Oh, they're going to get him. He's out. Holy cow. Desard made a perfect throw.
And so the Cubs forged on to a title, eventually winning the East on September 24th, 1984. Harry Carey's joyful shouting of Cubs win, became a rallying cry all over Chicago. And although the Cubs would later go on to lose to the Padres in the playoffs, the night of September 24th will go down as one of the greatest in Cub history.
Cubs win! Cubs win!
Actually, when it comes to the Cubs, winning or losing really isn't all. Is where the heart is. Well, that might be true for most, but for Cub fans, it's more likely that home is where the ivy is. You know, sometimes I wonder what the history of the Cubs would be without Wrigley Field. No homer in the Gloman by Gabby Hartnett. No Ernie Banks saying, hey, it's a beautiful day, let's play too. I mean, this old ballpark is as much a part of the team's tradition as any player, coach, manager, or owner. In a sense, Wrigley Field is the Cubs. And fans, all fans, not just Chicago fans, have enjoyed its special magic for over 70 years. Built in 1914, Wrigley Field was originally known as Wegman Park, and the Cubs didn't actually play there until April 20th, 1916. It was another 10 years before it got its present name, in honor of William Wrigley, who owned the team until his death in 1932, when the Cubs were then passed on to his son, P.K. Contrary to popular belief, most of what we see of the park today is not what people saw when it was first built. Since the beginning, Wrigley Field has undergone several renovations and expansions. Even the famous outfield walls were bare until 1938, when Bill Veeck planted some bittersweet and ivy to spruce them up. And the scoreboard didn't appear on top of the center field bleachers until 1937. Then there's the matter of lights. As any Cub fan knows, there are none. But even that was almost changed until Mr. Wrigley felt compelled to turn over lights meant for Wrigley Field to the war effort. So 2 years after the war, in the daylight of course, the All-Star Game came to Wrigley for the first time. In that game, the National League held a 1-0 lead on a Johnny Mize home run, but the American League rallied for a 2-1 win. It would be 15 years before the game would return, and that same year, not only would the Stars come to Wrigley Field, but Wrigley Field would be brought to the Stars.
We in television are convinced that the ability to portray immediacy, to realize what's new, what's going on, is the true significance of this new communications bridge. These first 18 minutes will attempt to show you a few of the things that are going on right now on the North American continent. I'm Walter Cronkite. Here is Chet Huntley.
Good evening, Europe. We had intended to take you at this time to Washington, where the President's weekly news conference is about to begin. But because of early acquisition at Andover, we got the Telstar circuit early, and the President has not yet started. So suppose we take you to a baseball game in Chicago instead.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just been informed that this baseball game is being seen in Europe right now over the Telstar satellite. Let's give all the baseball fans in Europe a big hello from Chicago.
No score in the ball game. Let's point. The Phillies, no runs, 1 hit, no errors. The Cubs, no runs, 2 hits, no errors.
Well, we realize that all of this doesn't make much sense to you folks in Europe, but if we hadn't shown you a bit of our national game on this first transatlantic show, we'd never have heard the end of it. As a matter of fact, right now, our colleagues who are doing the translating are going crazy trying to say runs, hits, and errors in Swedish and Italian. In any case, here it is, a brief glimpse of American baseball played in the biggest arena in the world, all the way from Wrigley Field in Chicago to the Coliseum in Rome.
I'm sure on that day, the one thing that didn't get lost in the translation was the beauty of Wrigley Field. In this era of multi-purpose stadiums, Wrigley Field remains a link to the past, right down to its natural turf, natural lighting, and manually operated scoreboard. But the charm of Wrigley Field lies not with the art of changing numbers by hand. It's much more than that. It's the continuity, the feeling of being in the same place as fans who once watched all the great moments in the stadium's history, like Babe Ruth's famous called shot in the World Series of 1932.
I'll never forget it. It was a tough series. Both clubs riding each other, doing everything to get each other's goat. Well, after this one particular time when I went to bat, Charlie Root was pitching. And I looked out at center field and I implored him. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball right past the flagpole. Well, the good Lord must have been with him.
Whether Ruth pointed or not is irrelevant. Like Mrs. O'Leary's cow, it makes a good story. The reality of the matter, though, is that Ruth's homer had very little to do with the outcome of the series. Let's face it, folks, the Yanks are going to win it anyway. But that wasn't the case with Gabby Hartnett's homer in the Gloman in 1938. Now that one was important. As the story goes, a crucial game between the Cubs and Pirates was about to be called because of darkness, until Hartnett put an abrupt end to the afternoon.
Gabby steps back into the box. Brown goes into his windup. He throws. Gabby swings. He hits it. It's a long, long drive, way out into left center. Lloyd Wayner is racing back. It's going. It's going. It may be. It may be. It is.
Of course, there have also been great moments in Wrigley Field when no one has hit a thing.
Watch it. There's a drive on the line to left field. Come on, Moose. He did it. He did it. What a fabulous catch. It's a no-hitter. A no-hitter. And what a catch that Moran made. Oh, brother, what a catch he made.
That's well hit. And there, I believe, goes the no-hitter.
Ball three, strike two. Here goes. Ground ball. Tuckered up with it. To throw to Banks. It's a no-hitter.
a no-hitter for Kenny Holtzman. Look at this. Oh, brother. Strike three. It's a no-hitter. A no-hitter for the kid, Bert Hooton. And look at him grab him. Everybody pouring out of the bench. Fans racing onto the field. Ball three. Strike two. 2 out. Perfect game on the line. No-hitter on the line. Watch it. It's a ball. And Pappas is enraged.
I don't know what Bruce was thinking. I think he was very stupid in what he did, looking back on it. Because all he had to do was raise his right hand. I'm sure nobody would have squawked, especially on the San Diego side. How many chances do you get? That was my one chance. You know, probably I feel fortunate that I did have the fact of doing that, but there was only 10 before that. So there hasn't been a lot of perfect games.
There's a high fly ball. Short right, should be caught. Fanzone's out there on the grass. He has it. It's a no-hitter for Pappas.
Milestones have been reached in Wrigley Field, too, like the day that Stan Musial came to Chicago and treated Cub fans to his 3,000th hit.
Here's the pitch. Line drive, there it is! Into left field! Hit number 3,000! A run is scored! Musial around first! On his way to second with a double! Holy cow, he came through!
27 years later, another great came through, too, when Pete Rose equaled Ty Cobb's all-time hit mark. But the best milestone of all belonged to Mr. Cub himself.
That's a fly ball, beats the left, back! That's it! That's it! Hey! He did it! Ernie Banks got number 500!
What a great thrill that was. Just tremendous there. It's a wonderful feeling. And as I was rounding the bases, I was thinking about all the people who have helped me become a Major League Baseball player. And, of course, playing here at Wrigley Field certainly has been a tremendous asset to my career.
There have also been days at Wrigley Field when our famous wind has had something to do with the final score.
Fly ball, left center, that's pretty well hit. Wow, come on. A home run for the pitcher. Wow. Oh, boy. That makes it 7-0. Johnny Moore has just tripled one in. And the score of this ball game now is Philadelphia 7, the Chicago Cubs 6. Well, Maddox has a double and a home run in this inning. So now the score of the ball game is Philadelphia 15, the Cubs 6. A home run for Adams. And now the score of this ball game is 17-9.
Terry Martin with a 2-run home run. 7 runs here in the 5th inning. It's now 21-16. You got to be kidding. Kingman's 3rd home run of the ball game, and let me tell you, it's now 21-19, and I'm losing my voice.
It's a tie game! Oh, brother! Oh, boy! Look at that score! Look at it and blink your eyes. And if you don't believe it, we can understand. And the score at the end of it is Philadelphia 22, the Chicago Cubs 22. Mike Schmidt has just gotten his 2nd home run of the day, and now the Phillies lead in this ball game by a score of 23-22. And a very sad finish to one of the greatest games anybody has ever seen anywhere.
Fortunately, one of the greatest performances by any one Cub player had a happy ending. It was in 1984 when Cubs second baseman Ryne Sandberg put on a hitting clinic against the Cardinals.
In left center field and deep. This is a tie ball game.
It was a crazy afternoon, I'll tell you. You know, the fans were out here. We had a full house. They were going crazy, and I was just glad to be a part of that ball game.
Sandberg didn't only tie the game once, he did it twice.
I think that was one of the games that made our players realize how good we could be. Everybody was watching it, all the Chicago Cub fans
I think, finally said, well, maybe the '84 Cubs can do it.
Of course the '84 Cubs did do it, and went on to smash the Padres 13-0 in the opening game of the playoffs at Wrigley.
Sends it deep left field. Going back and looking up is Martinez. It's gone. Cubs lead 1-0. Cubs on home runs by Dernier and Matthews. High to right, way back. This ball is gone.
After that, I guess the cynic and all Cub fans might say, sure, play enough games and you're bound to have some great moments. But let's be fair. The Cubs have won more games than any other one-city team in baseball history. So what if they've lost more too? The point is the Cubs have had their share of great players. I bet you didn't know that 35 Hall of Famers once put on their uniforms in a Cub clubhouse. That's 35, folks. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Most of them did play before 1945. So what? From 45 on, the Cubs have had some pretty good teams. And some guys who could play the game, too. None better, of course, than Mr. Cub himself, Ernie Banks. For 19 remarkable seasons, Banks' sunny disposition shined through the darkest days in Cub history, becoming along the way not only a deserving fan favorite, but a slugger of unlikely proportions.
I saw the first home run he ever hit, and that was in St. Louis at the old ballpark. Jerry Staley, who was a knuckleballer, was the pitcher, and Ernie Banks almost hit the scoreboard in left field. And little did I dream, or did he dream himself, that 511 more home runs would follow before he was through.
It was a surprise to me to be a home run hitter. When I played for the Kansas City Monarchs, basically I was a line drive single type hitter. And I joined the Cubs, and with the help of Ralph Kiner and a lot of great home run hitters on that team, Hank Sauer, another great home run hitter, they gave me some pointers on how and what it took to be a home run hitter, and it helped me a great deal.
Although the Cubs were chronic losers during most of Banks' career, Ernie never gave less than his best, and in 2 consecutive seasons was recognized as the league's most valuable player.
It meant a lot to me because, first of all, unfortunately, my club did not win the pennant that year. We finished 5th both years, and it was kind of unusual for a player to be the most valuable player when his team was not in contention or winning a pennant. So it took me about 3 or 4 years to realize the importance of the awards and what it meant with so many outstanding players in the National League.
Even with all his personal triumphs, Banks' fondest memory involves the team.
It was July 2nd, 1967, when the Cubs went in a tie for first place, and it was the first time in 30 years that the club had been in a tie for first place that late in the season. And to see 42,000 people in that park really happy and overjoyed for that particular moment was a great thrill in my life and career.
Still, there was to be one other great moment in Ernie's career.
Bingo is my name. I'll play 3 today. Play 4. Play 5. Yes, I know who this is. Jack Lang from New York City. I can't hear you. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, my goodness. Thank you very much, Jack. Hey. Wonderful. Just great. Oh, just great. I just sit here waiting. Great. Thank you. We got the set-in. Sunshine, fresh air. We got the team behind us. So let's play 2.
Then there's our other Hall of Famer, Billy Williams. As natural and consistent a player as ever put on a Cub uniform. For 16 Chicago summers, Williams was a fixture in left field, and his 1,117 consecutive games played is the 4th longest streak in the history of the game. But remembering Billy is remembering that swing.
So much has been said about my swing. It was something that I guess I had when I first started playing baseball. A lot of people in baseball saw it, and a lot of people in baseball predict that I would win the batting title someday. And of course, it was a thing that, I used to work at it. I had some traits of a good hitter, but I had to refine it. And with my determination, and of course with a great hitting coach like Roger Hansberry when he was with the Cubs, and we just worked on it, and all of a sudden I refined it and became one of the best swings in baseball.
That's hit way back. Say goodbye to that one. It is a home run. Hey, Billy Williams put one all the way out of the ballpark on Sheffield Avenue. Man, did he whack it.
My approach to hitting a baseball is to get a good ball to hit and try to hit the ball hard. Now, luckily, 426 of those balls went out of the ballpark.
Billy hits from the deep center field. Going back to center fielder Roque, but it is gone. Way up there in about the 6th or 7th row in center field, Billy Williams has just socked his 37th home run of the year.
I really thought that one year I had the most valuable player won, and after I didn't get it, I was a little disenchanted.
Oh, that's hit. Back she goes. Back. Hey! He did it! Billy Williams put it on the catwalk and rides the Cubs win the ball game.
I'd like to be remembered as being a consistent player. When the chips were down, I came through. I was that money type player we speak of, a player's player.
A player's player, and finally, a Hall of Famer.
Is that right? Oh, no. Is that it? Oh, beautiful. Oh, man. Shoot. 86% of the votes, huh? Is that right?
For pitchers, how about Ferguson Jenkins? Maybe the greatest ever to take the mound at Wrigley Field. In 1971, Fergie won 24 games to lead the league and become the first Cub to win a Cy Young Award. Okay, so all of his 3,000 career strikeouts didn't come in a Cub uniform, but his 6 straight 20-win seasons did, and that's quite a feat.
He got it. That's it. Swing and a miss. Strike 3. 7 strikeouts for Fergie. There's number 20 of the year for the 6th consecutive year.
Maybe someday soon Fergie will get his due and join Banks and Williams in the Hall of Fame. And when he gets there, he might as well save some room for Ron Santo. For 8 consecutive seasons, from 1963 to 1970, Santo hit more than 25 homers and played the kind of third base that turned heads.
There's a liner. Hey, what a catch by Santo. Man alive, did Ronnie come up with one there. A duplicate of the play before.
Still, Santo's legacy will be the long ball.
That's pretty well hit. Get ready for number 300. Back. Hey! A home run for Santo, the 300th of his career. September 21, 1971, Santo did it. Number 300.
One of the reasons the Cubs came out on top a lot during the late 60s and early 70s was their infield. Joining Santo was Don Kessinger, the Cubs shortstop for more than a decade. Kessinger came to Chicago in 1965, and when he ended his 11-year Cub career, he set a team record by playing in 1,618 games at short. Although he had a little trouble at first, Kessinger turned into one of the finest fielders in the league.
Takes the play. Ground ball, backhand stop by Kessinger, throws to second, a beautiful play by Kessinger. Oh, what a play. There's the drive, caught by Kessinger.
And sometimes Kessinger could hit, too.
There's a drive to the left, and that's 6 for 6 for Kessinger. How about that?
Kessinger's infield cohort was second baseman Glenn Beckert, a scrappy, gritty competitor who teamed with Don for 8 years, giving the Cubs a double-play combination like Tinker and Evers of years before. Like Kessinger, Beckert could also hit, and in 1971 he finished with a .342 average, the highest by any Cubs second baseman since Rogers Hornsby.
Beckert leads the league in hitting. Now, here's the try at the plate. Kessinger's across. Beckert to second, in safely.
In 1976, Rick Monday made Cub fans proud with his actions all over the field.
Goes Goff sends it up that power alley. Mundy hurries over. Rick. Oh, what a grab by Mundy! What a play by Rick Mundy!
That year, Mundy also made a unique play in Dodger Stadium when he prevented two people from burning an American flag in the outfield.
I don't think that I did anything that many other Americans would not only have done at that particular time, but hopefully going to be doing for another 200 years and protecting the rights and freedoms that we have in this country.
During his 7.5 seasons as a Cub, Bill Buckner never gave less than his all.
Did he or didn't he? He caught it. How about that? Boy, there's the catch of the Oracle now. Buckner running hard. He's got it. Oh, what a finish. Bill Buckner with two sensational grabs in 2 days.
Billy Buck had come to the Cubs in 1977, and by 1978 he finished second in the league in hitting. 2 years later, he would lead the league with a .324 average. But in 1984, with the Cubs on the verge of something wonderful, Buckner was traded. Ultimately, he would miss the Cubs' greatest achievement in 39 years, a season in which the Cubs drew over 2 million fans for the first time in history, and everyone would watch the Cubs go right to the top. Well, I certainly hope we don't have to wait another 39 years for the next title. But then again, we don't want the next generation of Cub fans to grow up only as winners, do we? After all, most Cub fans grew up with losing. Hey, the Cubs taught us about losing. They taught us about never giving up. They taught us about patience. Boy, do we have patience. Still, when someone asks me to describe a Cub fan, I'm reminded of that old story. The one where the optimist looks at half a glass of water and says, it's half full. Pessimist says it's half empty. But a Cub fan, well, a Cub fan looks at that same glass of water and he says, when's it going to spill? And don't tell me that's not justified. I mean, why in the heck would anyone continue to torture themselves and root for a team that hasn't won a pennant since 1945? Well, if you have to ask, you'll never understand. Rooting for the Cubs is in our blood. I bet there isn't a fan among us who didn't race home from school every now and then and try to catch the last few innings of a Cub game on radio and TV with the familiar voice of Jack Brickhouse.
Chicago Cubs Baseball Network. Well, it's opening day at Wrigley Field, a beautiful sunshiny day. This is that moment we've been dreaming about all winter, especially when that snow was flying in January around here. Looks like we're going to have a full house this afternoon. I'm Jack Brickhouse. Stay with us. It's going to be a great day in Chicago.
Brickhouse's contributions to baseball were recognized when he was honored at the Hall of Fame.
It's been my privilege to broadcast the exploits of the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox for 40 years or more. There in Wrigley Field and Comiskey Park, I have experienced the joy and the heartbreak, probably more of the latter than the former. But Chicago and its beautifully loyal fans have had a resiliency which has kindled a perpetual flame of hope.
If ever a group of fans deserved to be in the Hall, look no further than Cub fans, especially in 1969, when Dick Selma often whipped the bleacher bums into a frenzy. That year, even in defeat, Cub fans came across better than any other group of fans all over the country. After all, we showed those hated Met fans what rooting was all about. And so what if we lost? Winning isn't everything to a Cub fan. To us, the game's the thing. Now, we all know that the most knowledgeable baseball fans can be found at Wrigley Field, but how about the most visible? Well, they're Cub fans too, and they belong to a unique society founded in Washington, named after Emil Verbin, a supposedly long-forgotten second baseman of the 1940s.
A lot of sort of mythology got attached to the Cubs because they're so ecologically sound. They play on real grass and they play under the sunshine, and the Cubs were so miserable artistically that they went looking for all these other virtues. It's also, I think, has something to do with Chicago. Most really bitter American fights are about status, and Chicago has always felt a little put down. Someone writes a poem about them, and it's the hog butcher and the wheat stacker. That's not really what you'd want to be. So here you have this sort of bad image of a sort of rough-hewn city with an absolute doormat for a baseball team.
Here in Moscow, I have managed to redefine frustration. Frustration is being the honorary president of the Die-Hard Cubs fan club and being half a world away at their time of triumph. I mean, I have waited an entire lifetime waiting for the Cubs to win anything at all. And yet here in their finest days, I find myself half a world away on the banks of the Moscow River across the street from the Kremlin. And as you might suspect, my local Izvestia carries neither the box score nor the standings.
We walked up to the bar right by where I'm staying, and they have cable TV there, and we bought some drinks, and we bought the bartender a drink right away, and they were watching the U.S. Open tennis, and it was like we had to sort of bribe the bartender to get the Cub game on, you know. So we started, buying drinks and putting money out, big tips and everything. And then she told us that the cable was out of whack and that they weren't getting it. So we had to pick up all of our tips and leave right away, of course.
All my life I've believed in miracles. I believe that if you truly have faith, your dream will come true. And now after 39 years of waiting, the miracle is happening. I was sports announcer out in Des Moines. Since the sports announcing by way of the Cubs led to the Hollywood career, because it was going to California with the Cubs. They trained then at Catalina Island, and it was through that and through those visits that I was offered a screen test and quit making an honest living.
Ironically, Reagan's career would eventually come full circle when he played Cub pitcher Grover Cleveland Alexander in the movie The Winning Team.
They remember you, don't they? You've given them something to remember, Alex.
If Cub players can be remembered in Hollywood, then so should Cub fans. And they were in this television production of a play called The Bleacher Bums.
Take it over! Throw it back! Throw it back! Throw it back! Throw it back!
Excuse me, wasn't that a home run ball?
Yeah.
Well, don't they usually hang on to those for souvenirs, something like that? Why'd the kid throw it back?
Lady, that there is a class move. I mean, if somebody hands you some garbage, you gotta throw it back in their face, huh?
Whether or not throwing it back is a class move is certainly debatable, but you've got to admit, it's unique. Then again, that's what being a Cub fan is all about. And I'm sure the Cubs got a taste of that during that special '84 season, when they showed the fans just how much their support meant to them. That day, the Cub players thanked the fans, not only for 1984, but for 1945 and 1908. They thanked the fans for all the years of sticking with them, through all the losing, and finally, the winning. You know, I can't even imagine this town without the Cubs. I can't imagine a summer's afternoon without all that talk on Michigan Avenue and out in the neighborhoods about this play or that hit, this win or that loss. I bet you almost everyone watching me right now can remember where they were the night the Cubs clinched the East in '84. That night, with all the memories, all the laughing and crying, the Cubs showed me how much a part of the city they really are. Oh, was it fun. And you just watch. One of these days, yeah, one of these